Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the opportunity to come to the floor to answer the specific question. And I would point to an op-ed that I wrote for the New York Times last year. Perhaps the senator from New York doesn't read his hometown newspaper, but there's an editorial, New York Times, December 18th, "Cut Carbon Through Innovation, Not Regulation." It's a plan. Cut carbon through innovation, not regulation. The question is, do we believe that the climate is changing? Do humans have an impact? The answer is yes to both. As a matter of fact, I wrote it, climate is changing, and we collectively have a responsibility to do something about it. Right here, New York Times, December 18th. Second, the United States and the world will continue to rely on affordable and abundant fossil fuels, including coal, to power our economies for decades to come. And we need to also rely on innovation, not new taxes, not punishing global agreements. That's the ultimate solution. And I will point out, Mr. President, that this is something that I had written and submitted and published long before the so-called Green New Deal was ever introduced into Congress, either in the House or into the Senate. I go on to say people across the world are rejecting the idea that carbon taxes and raising the cost of energy is the answer to lowering emissions. Because we know, Mr. President, as I go on in France, the government had just suspended a planned fuel tax increase after some of its citizens took to the streets in protest. It was every story on the news. And in the United States, the results of the November election showed that these plans and other government interventions are just as unpopular. Voters in Washington State rejected the creation of an expensive tax on carbon emissions. In Colorado, a ballot measure to severely restrict drilling was defeated. And in Arizona, voters rejected a mandate to make the state's utilities much more dependent on renewable energy by 2030. They rejected it, regardless of the cost to consumers. So, Mr. President, I would point out that all three of those states elected liberal Democrats to Congress on election night. And, Mr. President, in further answer to that question, I would point to USA Today, March 4th, 2019. Now, today is the 6th, so we're talking Monday. Today is Wednesday. This is this week's paper. Front page, to a warming planet's rescue, to the rescue of a warming planet, carbon capture. In the race against climate change, scientists are looking for ways to pull CO2 out of the Earth's atmosphere and store it away. And what they point to, Mr. President, is bipartisan legislation passed by this body, passed by the House, signed into law by President Trump, focusing on carbon capture, sequestration, talks about a program called 45Q that is the Future Act. One of the co-sponsors from the other side of the aisle is on the floor right now. His name is mentioned, my name is mentioned, in finding the solution. So there are Republican solutions and ideas that are focused on innovation, not regulation, not taxation, focused on freedom and the innovation that we've had. So I just come to tell you, Mr. President, that there are solutions. The Republicans will continue to offer them. We had a hearing most recently, just last week, on something called the Use It Act, again, to capture carbon and to sequester it. We've been working on new age nuclear power, working with leaders around the world. We have passed that, and it was signed into law. An innovation bill for nuclear power, new age nuclear power, that will be smaller reactors, safer reactors, cheaper to use. No carbon whatsoever, Mr. President. So there are absolute solutions, and Republicans are going to continue to come to the floor, but we're not going to support something that would bankrupt the country, something that would raise the cost of energy for families, something that would drive people to the point of having to spend money they don't have, having our country borrow money that we don't have, all at a time. When you say, what is the cost? There are suggestions and numbers that have been raised. I haven't heard any numbers from the other side of the aisle. So, Mr. President, I come to the floor to tell you Republicans have continued to offer solutions, and some of these solutions I've been offering for 10 years. It took us a while to get these into into law, but they are working. They're working, and it had been identified as working. Even President Obama's former president's Secretary of Energy, Ernie Moniz, who came and testified in the Energy Committee, said there are two things that will make a big difference. One is the new age nuclear work that we're doing, and the other is carbon capture and sequestration. Those are large-scale products that work. So, Mr. President, I see other colleagues on the floor, and do I have the floor right now, or am I in response to a question?
The senator from Wyoming has the floor.
Well, as I then continue to have the floor, I would like to point out that, look, we have a booming economy in this country, Mr. President. In just over a year, with tax relief, helped create 3 million new jobs, manufacturing jobs, 10 straight months of increased fact that we have more jobs available than there are people looking for those jobs. We have a booming economy. I want to do nothing that's going to harm these people all across the country that are working, that have an opportunity for such a strong, healthy, growing economy. But this Green New Deal, this big government takeover of the economy, it's masked as an environmental proposal. To me, it's radical. The president of the Laborers International Union of North America calls it a bad deal. You take a look at America, we're leading the world in reducing carbon dioxide because of the technological and innovative techniques that we have had. And we know that what we hear about the Green New Deal, it's prohibitively expensive. Predictions up to $93 trillion. The entire net worth of the United States, of all the homes and all the families and everything, is only a little, 112 trillion, and this alone would cost 93 trillion. You can go by all of how much it's going to cost every individual family. It's completely unaffordable. It's not something that is workable, but it is so far outside the American mainstream, even if it were affordable. So what we have seen here is the Democrats take another hard left turn. In just 10 years, the nation's energy system under this Green New Deal would undergo a Washington makeover. The Green New Deal would end the use of energy resources that currently provide power for 3 out of 5 homes in the United States and businesses in the United States. So think about the harm that would cause the economy. This Green New Deal mandates the use of expensive power sources that can't keep the lights on. Look, wind and solar are important. We need more renewable energy in this country. But right now, wind and solar provide less than 8% of our electricity. So should we increase the use of renewables? Absolutely. But eliminating affordable coal and natural gas would be a costly mistake. And not only that, it's impossible to do. The electric grid can't handle it. Last month, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal, an op-ed entitled, "The Green New Deal's Impossible Electric Grid." Impossible electric grid. Written by Robert Bloom of the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. He writes that if the electric grid relies solely on renewable energy sources, the grid itself may collapse. And that's not all we lose if the grid collapses. Our transportation system is in the crosshairs. The Green New Deal seeks to transform how Americans travel. It calls for an extensive and expensive national high-speed rail system to replace air travel. The state of California attempted to build a high-speed rail line between Los Angeles and San Francisco. Turns out the price was too high, Mr. President, even for California. The governor, Gavin Newsom, had canceled the line just recently between San Francisco and Los Angeles. Why? He said because of the massive cost. But it's all part of the Green New Deal. Question is, if California can't afford to build high-speed rail between 2 major cities, how can we afford to build a system that crisscrosses the country? We can't. The Green New Deal doesn't stop at energy and travel. It extends to every building in the country. Homeowners are going to be forced to retrofit their houses. Businesses would have to do the same. This is what massive government overreach looks like. The rest of the world, Mr. President, is going to continue to pollute, even if the country were to adopt something as extreme as the Green New Deal. It would cancel all of the gains that we made in the United States by the fact that our emissions continue to go down. 2017, we produced just 13% of global emissions here in the United States. Just 13%. China and India together, 33%, and they're rising over there. Without dramatic changes from India and China, global emissions are going to continue to climb. So even if all the Green New Deal's costly mandates went into effect and the punishment it would do to our country and our economy, still be no real effect on Earth's temperature. So look, it's no surprise that the Democrats are trying to duck this big green bomb. Senate Democrats may even decide to vote present to avoid voting for their own extreme proposal that a dozen of them have either signed on to or co-sponsored, including just about every Democrat senator who's running for president. They've all signed on. They're all co-sponsoring it. This green dream is unreachable, but there's a proven way to reduce our emissions, which is why I talk about what we're wanting to do in a positive way with nuclear energy, with carbon capture, things that have gathered the attention of the New York Times and of the front page of USA Today on Monday. So we're going to continue to work with the Future Act, with the Use It Act. The committee is going to continue to work in a bipartisan way because Republicans are committed to find solutions through innovation, not taxation, not regulation, solutions that do not hurt our strong and healthy growing economy. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
President.